Hey there, viewers. When someone like Diddy suddenly vanishes from a high-security prison, it's not just a headline, it's a full-blown emergency. Just minutes ago, reports came in that he's missing, and now even the authorities are scrambling. Something's not adding up. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Hallway Nurse's Silence. It was 3:12 in the morning when I found myself standing at the end of C Block again. The hallway was cold, quiet, in that thick kind of way that makes your own breath sound louder than it should. I'd done this same walk more times than I could count, but that night felt different. Not because anything looked different. Same pale green walls, same flickering ceiling light over cell 48. But because I had that feeling again, that heavy weight in the chest, like I was stepping into something I wouldn't be able to walk back out of. I'm Nurse L, been working nights at MDC Brooklyn for almost 5 years now. Not a dream job, but it's steady. I don't ask questions I don't need answers to, and that's served me just fine, most of the time. The clipboard in my hand had the usual scrawl from the evening shift. Inmate D, third wellness check since midnight. The notes had gotten more vague lately, almost like someone was being told not to document too much. Refused tray. 0% intake. Did not respond to name. Possible visual disturbance. Requesting psych follow-up. Condition X. That last part had been underlined twice. No explanation, just Condition X. It wasn't an official diagnosis or term anyone taught me in training. We all started using it a few months back when weird symptoms cropped up that didn't match anything in the books. Weight loss without cause, skin like wax paper, eyes unfocused like they were looking into something that wasn't there. No fevers, no known infection, just rapid deterioration, like they were melting inside their skin. Inmate D had it worse than anyone. He used to be loud, charming even. Not that I care much about celebrity nonsense, but I recognized him right away when they brought him in. Puffy face, sunglasses indoors, gold fillings in his teeth. Back then, he walked in like he owned the place, but that wasn't the man I'd been checking on every night for the past 2 weeks. I remember the first time I noticed the change. I was doing med rounds and stopped at his cell. He was pacing. Not just pacing, but tracing his own path again and again, like he was wearing a trench into the floor. His mouth was moving, fast. But no sound was coming out, just the shape of words I didn't recognize. It wasn't English, it wasn't Spanish, not anything I knew. But there was a rhythm to it, like a chant. When I asked if he was okay, he stopped and looked right at me, and I swear to God his eyes didn't blink, just held me there. His hair had gone completely gray by then, all within a matter of days, and his skin, it looked tight, stretched thin, like something underneath was trying to push its way out. After that, he stopped talking altogether. Wouldn't eat anything but the sealed water bottles we were allowed to bring from the outer storage. Wouldn't let us touch him either. We had to slide a notepad through the slot so he could write down anything he needed, but most of the time he'd just scribble the same 2 words, "Still here." That night, I had 2 sealed waters in hand, along with the notepad, just like always. I keyed in the access code to the hallway, same 6 digits we rotate every 2 days, and waited for the soft buzz of the lock. The gate clicked open slower than usual, groaning like it didn't want to let me through. My footsteps echoed against the concrete. The place smelled like bleach and copper, the usual blend of overcleaning and old pipes. Cell 49 was empty. Cell 50 was where Diddy was kept. I reached it and hesitated. The little window in the door was fogged over. Strange. We don't allow hot showers in that block after midnight. I tapped on the window gently. "Inmate D," I said, voice low but clear. "Welfare check." No answer. I bent slightly to peek in, expecting to see him crouched in the corner like usual. But I couldn't see much of anything, just a shadow on the far wall. I slid the latch on the door open, and that's when it hit me. The door wasn't locked. My fingers stopped on the handle. I waited. Nothing happened. No alarms, no sudden yell from one of the guards watching cams. I pushed the door open. The inside of the cell was quiet. Neat, oddly neat. His bed was made too well. The sheets were tucked in military style, corners folded crisp. The pillow was perfectly centered. The 2 water bottles from the night before were untouched. His notepad was gone. And the bed was cold. I stepped fully inside, not sure what I was supposed to do. Technically, I was supposed to notify Central Security first before entering an inmate's cell, but something told me that the cameras weren't recording. Or maybe they were, and someone didn't care. Either way, I was alone. I stood still, listening. Something faint was buzzing near the ceiling vent. A light red flicker, like a smoke detector's dying heartbeat. I backed out slowly, breathing shallow now, trying not to make noise. Once I reached the hallway, I pressed the intercom. "This is Nurse L on Unit C. Inmate D is not in his cell." There was a pause. "Repeat," came a voice, static-laced. "Inmate D is missing. The door was unlocked." Another pause, longer this time. "Return to medical wing. We'll handle it." I waited for something else. An alarm? A lockdown call? But nothing happened. No response. The hallway just stayed quiet. I walked back the way I came, my shoes squeaking faintly against the polished floor. It felt wrong to walk away, but something told me not to push it, that whatever was happening had already started before I got there. As I neared the med wing, I passed Guard R leaning against the wall by the cafeteria door. He was off shift, but still in uniform, smoking an e-cig with one hand in his pocket. He didn't look at me right away. "Long night," I muttered, half expecting him to ignore me. But he didn't. He exhaled slow, then turned to me with that look I've only seen a few times. Once when we lost power during a winter storm, and again when an inmate was found dead in the laundry chute. "You saw nothing," he said, quiet, not unkind. "Just go home tonight." I stopped walking. He looked down at his feet, like he regretted saying anything at all. Then he pushed off the wall and walked past me, heading deeper into the wing, past the red exit sign that never lights up right. I stood there for a while. I never reported that I went into the cell. Never wrote down what I saw. I should have, I know that. But the cameras didn't flag my presence. My shift record showed me logged at Med Station B. The clipboard entry disappeared by morning. And Diddy was just gone. The official record says he was transferred. That's the word they used, transferred. No location, no paperwork, just a checkbox ticked complete. But I know what I saw, or more importantly, what I didn't see. And whatever that was, it's still here. Chapter 2, The Man in Unit C. I've been in this place longer than the rust on the bars. People come and go, most just fade into the walls like shadows that don't know how to leave. Me? I stay still, watch, listen. That's all you can really do when time moves like syrup and the walls never change color. My name's Jay. That's all anyone calls me now, and that's fine by me. I'm across from the cell where D used to be. You know who I'm talking about. The man in 50. People used to whisper when he showed up. Some of the younger ones thought he was a god, or a devil, depends on who you asked. The guards called him celebrity trash at first, but they stopped saying that once they saw how fast he started unraveling. I saw it too, more than most. He didn't go crazy like a man pushed too far, nah. It was quieter than that, slower. He rotted from the inside. You ever seen fruit left too long on the windowsill? Looks good on the outside until you touch it and it collapses in on itself. That's what D was like. First it was the silence, then the twitching. Always twitching, his neck, his fingers, even his tongue some nights when the lights flickered. He started scratching messages into the wall with his fingernails, deep ones, Not just bored scribbles either. There was a pattern to it, lines inside of circles, like maps or diagrams. I asked him once what it meant. He didn't answer, just pressed his palm flat against the wall and whispered something through it, like he was expecting a reply from the other side. Then he smiled, slow and crooked, like whatever answered him said something funny. Every night for weeks, he'd crouch in the corner facing away from the door. No blanket, no shoes, just him in that thin white shirt and those paper-thin pants, knees to his chest. He'd mumble, slow at first, then louder. I started thinking he was praying, but not to God. No, God don't listen in this place. He was speaking to someone or something that wasn't in the cell with him. He'd pause, like he was getting told something, then nod and mumble back. Sometimes he'd laugh, a soft little giggle that turned into coughing fits. Other times he'd cry, not loud, not shaking, just tears rolling down his cheeks like he didn't even notice. The night he disappeared, something felt off before I even opened my eyes. I dozed off for maybe 10 minutes, long enough to dream, short enough to feel like I hadn't slept at all. The air had changed. It was heavier, like the air after a lightning strike, but without the light or the sound. I sat up slow, bones aching like always. I looked toward his cell, and that's when I saw it. The hallway camera. It buzzed once, a sharp electric crack, then the little light that's always green turned red. I've been here 23 years. I ain't never seen that red light before, not once. Then came the smell. It snuck in through the vent above my bed. Most days that vent just leaks dust and whatever smell is coming from the kitchens. But that night, it smelled like wilted flowers, not just dead ones, decayed like they'd been dipped in old milk and left in the sun, mixed with bleach. A sharp chemical sting under the rot. It made the back of my throat itch and I felt a headache slide behind my eyes. I stood, gripped the bars and looked out. The cell looked darker than usual. The light inside was dim, but that wasn't it. It was like the darkness had weight. It was hanging in there, thick and slow. I saw him, at least I think I did. He was standing in the center of the cell, arms down by his sides, palms out. He wasn't twitching this time. He was still. Too still. I called his name, just once. No answer. Then he spoke. But it wasn't just him. There were two voices. His voice, I knew, raspy, cracked, like someone trying to talk through sandpaper. But the second voice? It was wrong, wet and slow, like it was being dragged across a tongue that didn't belong to a man. It echoed, but not against the walls. It echoed inside me, like I heard it from the back of my own skull. It said something, and I didn't understand the words, but I understood what they meant. It said goodbye, but not to me, not even to Dee. It said goodbye to everything. I backed away from the bars and sat down hard on my bed. My heart was beating like I'd just run a mile and my skin felt too tight. The smell in the vent got stronger. I covered my face with my shirt and rocked for a few minutes, just waiting for the buzzing in my ears to stop. When I looked up again, the red light was gone. Dee's cell was empty. Door closed. No one walked by. No alarm. Nothing. They cleaned that cell fast. Next morning, a couple of guards and a cleaner in hazmat gear went in. They scraped the floor, scrubbed the walls, even sealed the vent. But I know what they missed, because 3 nights later, I saw it again. The mark. It was back. They'd missed the one under the bed frame. A symbol made with baby oil and something else. I don't want to guess what. It looked like a circle filled with sharp lines, almost like teeth. The outer edge had symbols I didn't recognize, but one of them looked like an eye split down the center. I didn't tell anyone. I just laid low, kept my mouth shut and watched. Guards stopped walking by that cell. They'd rush past it like it wasn't there. No new inmate got placed inside. They didn't even turn the light on anymore. It just sat there, sealed and quiet, like a tomb. A week later, when the cleaning crew came by to remove trash, I saw something slip out of the bin they dragged from Dee's cell. A little folded paper, stained and torn, fluttered under the cart. I waited until the hall was clear, then used my toothbrush to hook it through the bars and pull it into my cell. It was a note. Just 6 words, all caps, shaky hand. They already came once. The next time, I go. I read it twice, then folded it again and slid it under my mattress. Been thinking about it ever since. Some of these younger guys think Dee escaped. Some think he got transferred to a cushy cell or whisked away by his lawyers. But I know what I heard. I know what I smelled, what I saw. He didn't leave like a man with a plan. He was taken. Or worse, he went willingly because he knew what was waiting for him. Or maybe he wanted it. Maybe he was never talking to himself at all. And maybe, just maybe, it's not done with us yet. Chapter 3, The Warden's Dilemma. The call came through the red line, the one that only rang when something had already gone wrong. No ringtone, just a sharp electric buzz that snapped me upright in bed like a cattle prod to the spine. I stared at the receiver for a few seconds, chest tight, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. That line never rings for anything small. I answered without saying my name. The voice on the other end was clipped dry, no identifiers. The asset is missing. That was all they said. Not inmate, not Diddy, just the asset. I didn't ask who they were. That's part of the unspoken agreement when you're in my position. The less you ask, the longer you stay in that position. I didn't bother trying to go back to sleep. Sleep had already retreated like a dog that knows when it's no longer welcome. I got dressed in silence, boots on before my pants were even buttoned, shirt halfway tucked, badge swinging loose around my neck. The cold from the floor bit through my soles, but I didn't feel it. My hands knew the motions, even if my mind hadn't caught up yet. Down the hall, past the locked admin offices, and through 2 levels of keycard security, I reached the one room no one else but me had access to. The vault was old, steel thick enough to hold back a fire, flood, or fallout. I opened it with a fingerprint scan and retinal match. Inside was a single safe, and inside that safe was an envelope I hadn't touched in 2 years. Contingency Omega? Separation Protocol? I held it for a moment, the weight of it far heavier than the paper should have been. It was sealed with red wax, DOJ seal, the real kind, not the kind they use for courtroom drama shows. It looked too official, too real, too final. I broke the seal and pulled the contents out slowly. 6 pages, no signatures, just codes and directives, no ink names. One paragraph stood out more than the rest. Memorized it in seconds. Inmate 50C is under enhanced observation status pursuant to internal authorization, derived from sealed witness matrix item E6R. No external communication permitted. All incidents related to subject are to be contained, redirected, or redacted at the administrative level. In the event of breach or disappearance, initiate separation protocol. No notification to media, public, or non-cleared personnel permitted. There it was. Confirmation. Diddy wasn't just another high-profile prisoner. He was something else. Something even I wasn't fully briefed on. That word, matrix. I'd seen it in passing on a different file months back. It meant this case wasn't purely legal. It was operational, buried deep in layers of security clearance even the Bureau avoided talking about. A knock came on the steel office door. I turned quickly, heart jackhammering in my chest, but it was just Deputy Ward. Pale, jittery, not the kind of man built for emergencies. I checked the logs, he said, voice low, eyes darting behind him like he wasn't sure he should be speaking to me at all. They're gone. Which logs? All of them. I stared at him. What do you mean? All? I mean, there's nothing. The past 72 hours. All surveillance files related to Cell Block C deleted, not just from the mainframe, from the backups too. That didn't make sense. Our digital retention system doesn't allow deletions without biometric confirmation from 2 senior-level administrators, and I hadn't given mine. "Pull analog copies," I ordered. We tried. The vault reels are blank. Blank. Not corrupted, not missing. Blank. Like something had been wiped clean, cleared by someone with access above mine. The flashback hit me like a shove. 2 weeks prior, I'd authorized a special medical team to visit Diddy under the guise of psychiatric evaluation. They didn't come through normal channels, no FBI, no marshals. Just an unmarked black van that pulled up at the north gate. 4 men stepped out, 2 in scrubs, 1 in a long coat, and the 4th wearing gloves and sunglasses at midnight. No names given, just a clipboard with a signature block already filled. They brought a case with them, silver, unmarked. When they left 3 hours later, the case was lighter, and Diddy hadn't spoken since. I was told not to ask what was in the injection, that it was for his mental stability and protection. I believed it at the time. Now I knew better. Or worse, I suspected. I dismissed Ward and sat down behind my desk, turned the monitor on, logged into the private admin system using a code I hadn't used in months, only for red-level situations. There it was, a 6-second security anomaly flagged by the system as corrupted feed. Time tip, 3:14 to 7 to 3:14, 30. Location, hallway C, right outside cell 50. I clicked play. The footage started normal. Nurse L approaching the cell, water bottles in hand. She pauses. Then the screen goes black. No flicker, no distortion, just nothing. Then, 6 seconds later, it resumes. She's standing in the same spot, but her body is turned slightly, head cocked to the side, like she's hearing something out of frame. Her lips are parted, but she's not speaking. Then she backs away and the footage cuts again. That's when I heard the door behind me open without a knock. A man in a gray suit stepped inside. No ID badge, no visible weapon, short hair, clean shave. He closed the door behind him and walked across the room like he'd done it before. Sat down across from me and placed a phone on the desk. A burner, basic model, no SIM. He tapped the screen. A single file began to play. The voice that came through was unmistakably Diddy's, but it didn't sound like him from recent weeks. It was older, more focused, still filled with that charisma he used to carry before all this turned him into a ghost. "You can't bury it, you can't kill it, it remembers." That was it. One sentence, no intro, no context, just those words. The man stood, picked up the phone and nodded once. "Protocol is active," he said. "You are to deny all knowledge of transfer event 1. Do not pursue follow-up. Do not engage with internal staff inquiries. Containment is now federal." Then he left. I sat there alone, palms sweating against the wood, mouth dry like cotton. The man hadn't shown a badge, but he didn't need to. He had the authority of someone you don't question unless you want your entire life erased. I looked down at the file still open on my screen. That 6-second gap played again, looping silently. "You can't bury it, you can't kill it. It remembers." I didn't know what it was. I didn't want to. But the silence left in that sentence was heavier than any explanation could have been. It implied a presence, a memory, maybe even a force. Not metaphorical, not symbolic. Something real, something patient. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Where the hell did they take him? Chapter 4. The Riot That Wasn't. Most people think the worst thing that can happen on this job is a full-scale inmate riot. Shivs drawn, fires lit, blood smeared across walls. But that's not the kind of thing that keeps me up at night. No, what keeps me awake is the kind of event they tell you didn't happen. The kind they clean up so well even the security logs look untouched. The kind they rename in reports, dress up in harmless language, like the one they're calling a failed drill on March 31st. They said it was a false fire alarm in Admin Wing B paired with a minor inmate disruption in Cell Block C. A coincidence. That's the word they used, coincidence. And yet, 3 cameras looped for exactly 3 minutes across different floors, and not one person questioned why. They blamed it on faulty wiring and went back to their desks like nothing had happened. But I know better. Because I was there, and what I saw doesn't have a box on any form we're trained to fill out. My name is Officer Brooks. Been running tower security rotations for 12 years. Not because I'm ambitious, but because I know how to keep my head down and my eyes sharp. The tower is where they stick guys like me. Quiet types, not easily rattled, not eager to spread rumors. But even we have our limits. That night, the first thing I noticed was the cameras flickering. It was subtle at first, barely more than a blink, like the signal was skipping frames. I was watching the feed from Block D when it happened exactly 3:11 a.m. The image paused for a fraction of a second, then repeated the same 3-second clip twice before resuming like nothing was wrong. I tapped into the system, ran a diagnostic, nothing. Then, just as I was logging the anomaly, the red alert buzzed through the intercom. Fire detected in Admin Wing B. Protocol says we check all alerts in person, even if they're likely false. Within minutes, me and 2 other officers, Carlson and Gomez, were rerouted to the location. But here's the thing. When we arrived at Wing B, there was no smoke, no heat, no fire crew, just a handful of blinking indicators and a light sulfur smell that didn't match anything electrical. One of the admin secretaries looked confused when we told her what the alerts said. She claimed there hadn't been a single fire drill scheduled all month. That's when I noticed it. One of the metal panels on the floor was half open, tucked under an old storage cabinet pushed aside like it had been moved in a hurry. I don't know who moved that cabinet. It wasn't on wheels. It would have taken at least 2 people, and nobody logged any movement in the maintenance system. The opening beneath led down into one of the old tunnel networks beneath the building, part of the original infrastructure from decades ago, back when MDC Brooklyn handled more than just inmates. No one had used those tunnels in years, at least not officially. We radioed in the find, expected to get a denial or a warning to stay put, but instead we got a cold voice telling us to proceed and report anything unusual, the kind of voice that doesn't ask questions, just gives permission. I looked at Carlson. He shrugged, hand already on his flashlight. Gomez didn't say a word, just clicked on his shoulder cam and followed. The tunnel smelled like wet metal and antiseptic. The walls were lined with flaking white tiles, most covered in graffiti from a time before even I'd started working here. About 20 yards in, the temperature dropped, not gradually, suddenly, like we'd stepped into a freezer. We didn't say anything, just kept walking, boots echoing off the old tile. The only light came from our flashlights. The overhead fixtures hadn't worked in years. We passed a series of old doors, most sealed shut with rusted locks or welded plates. One of them, though, was slightly ajar. No markings, just a number stenciled on the door. C0. The 0 looked newer than the C, like someone had updated it recently. Inside, the air shifted, thicker. Felt like trying to breathe through a wet towel. The room was small, no more than 10 feet by 10. A single metal table sat in the center, legs bolted to the floor. Not the kind of table for eating or paperwork. It was the kind with restraints on each corner. Dust covered everything except the center of the table, where a faint smear of something reddish-brown remained, partially cleaned but not gone. That's when I noticed the scratches on the floor. They were deep, angry, made by something sharp, maybe nails, maybe metal. They weren't random either. Same shape repeated again and again, a circle filled with jagged angles, lines cutting through its center like spokes on a wheel. I'd seen that symbol before, though I hadn't realized it until that moment. It was the same one that got reported from Diddy's cell, the one some of the guards thought was just him having a breakdown, except now it was here, in a room no one was supposed to be using, a room not listed on the current blueprints. We heard something then, a rustling, like cloth dragging across stone. We turned fast, flashlights flaring into the hallway. Nothing. Then we noticed Gomez wasn't behind us. We called his name, no answer, just the slow creak of something deeper in the tunnel. Carlson bolted first, retracing our steps. I followed, shouting Gomez's name louder than I should have. Panic was rising in my throat like bile. The air grew thicker, like the hallway itself was narrowing around us. When we found him, he was slumped against the wall about 30 feet from the room. Knees pulled to his chest, head down, hands shaking. His face was pale, lips dry and cracked, eyes wide open but staring at nothing. A slick black fluid covered his chin and shirt like he'd vomited ink. He didn't speak. Not then, not when we carried him out, not during the medic assessment, not once since. He was medically discharged the next morning. Quietly, no file, no follow-up. They said it was stress, acute breakdown. I knew better, so did Carlson. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. Something about what we found didn't feel finished, like we'd walked in on something mid-process, like we were trespassers in a ritual we didn't understand. So I did the only thing I could. I went back to the tower, pulled up the archived feed from the cameras in Block C. Most of it was as expected. Loops, static, blank frames. Except one. 3. And the forklift Eta hence please indicate before any further admissions. We'd get too far. In the past, the duty of adult therapists required therapists to observe, establish guidance, provide help, reduce, or report the therapist, then describe their case with us. Benny, hell. Diddy, on screen. He was walking, not rushed, calm, face blank, arms at his side. But he wasn't in his cell. He was outside of it, in the hallway, and he was walking past a locked gate that hadn't opened. There was no flash of movement. No one appeared to let him through. He just passed through the bars like they weren't even there. I watched the clip 5 times, then 10. Then again with audio. There was no sound except a low hum buried deep in the static, like the vibration of a tuning fork underwater. It made my teeth ache. I haven't told anyone about what I saw. No one else pulled that clip before it disappeared, because the next time I logged into the system, that file was gone, replaced with a no data available message that didn't belong in our archives. And the worst part? I don't think he walked out alone. Chapter 5, The Other Nurse's Testimony. It wasn't a formal interview, they made that clear from the beginning. No official record, no audio, no transcript. Just a conversation. That's what the man in the black coat called it. A conversation for clarification purposes, he said. Off the books. Just between professionals, he added, as if that meant anything anymore. I sat across from him in a hotel room too far from home, in a town I didn't choose, reassigned to a job I didn't apply for. I was still wearing my old badge when I got the call, an untraceable number, the voice dry and friendly, asking if I remembered the patient from cell block C. Of course I did. No one forgets someone like that. They moved me fast after everything. One morning I was on schedule for a 12-hour graveyard shift, and by evening my access badge didn't work. No warning, no explanation. Security walked me out without a word. I didn't argue. I'd seen enough in that place to know when it was time to keep your mouth shut and your hands empty. Still, it lingered. What I saw, what I heard, what I felt. Diddy wasn't like the others. Not even close. I'd worked with inmates who screamed through the night, who hallucinated bugs under their skin, who swung fists at shadows and cursed at God. But Diddy was silent, controlled. He didn't shout, didn't weep. He whispered, always low and careful, like he thought something was listening in. He refused all meals, refused meds too, unless he could see the seal himself. Only ever drank bottled water, and even then he wouldn't take it unless the cap was intact. And he always turned it 3 times in his hand before opening it. I thought it was a ritual, some form of control, but now I wonder if it was something else. A way to check for something we couldn't see. He never let anyone touch him. Said he had skin memory. Said it absorbed things. That once something touched him, it never really left. We laughed about it in the break room. Called him paranoid. Said he was acting. But then I saw the mark. It was early morning, barely past 2. I was doing rounds, checking vitals through the door windows like usual. Diddy hadn't been sleeping well, or at all, really. He'd sit cross-legged in the middle of the floor, palms up, eyes closed, like he was meditating or waiting. I don't know what made me stop that night. Something about the way he was hunched forward, spine curved awkwardly, shirt clinging to his back with sweat. He shifted just enough for the hem of his shirt to rise, and that's when I saw it. A dark shape, right above his waistband. At first I thought it was a bruise, but it moved. It pulsed, slow and rhythmic, like a heartbeat, or something mimicking one. I leaned in, heart thudding, trying to make out the edges. It wasn't symmetrical, not a tattoo, more like a cluster of veins, swollen and slick, forming a kind of spiral. I stepped back fast. I knew I hadn't imagined it. It pulsed again, then flattened like it had felt me watching. I filed a report. Took me 2 hours to write it. Detailed everything, his symptoms, the mark, my recommendation for immediate transfer to medical isolation. I uploaded it into the system before sunrise. By the time I came back for my next shift, the report was gone. Not redacted, not flagged, gone. Like I'd never written it. My access badge didn't work that night. I asked the guard at the desk to check the roster. He looked at me like I'd shown up to the wrong job. "You've been reassigned," he said. "Didn't they tell you?" No. No one told me anything. The next day, a plain envelope was slid under my apartment door. Inside was a train ticket, a key card to a low-level VA hospital 3 states away, and a new badge already printed with my photo. No instructions, no letter. Just a fresh start without asking. Before I left, I went back to the med wing one last time. I knew they wouldn't have changed the carts yet. There's always one locked cabinet at the bottom, the one no one bothers using because the lock sticks. I pried it open and found what I was looking for. His last vitals sheet, crumpled and unsigned. Taped to the bottom was a yellow post-it note, half torn. "The file isn't here, it's buried in the floor." No name, no date, just those words, scribbled in capital letters, uneven like someone wrote it in a hurry, or under stress. It didn't make sense at first. I thought it was a metaphor. Then I remembered something. The week before he disappeared, Diddy had started tearing up pieces of his mattress. Not violently, just careful slices, thin strips of foam left piled near the vent. Maintenance thought it was a suicide prep. But there were no ligature marks, no signs of planning. What we missed, what I missed, was that he'd also started shifting the floor tiles near the drain in the center of his cell. One night, I found 3 of them misaligned, not broken, just lifted slightly, like something underneath had pushed up. He was trying to tell us something. or maybe trying to reach something that was already there. I mentioned the mark to one of the other nurses before I left. She said she saw it too, that it seemed to move more when the lights flickered. Said it made her dream strange things, people standing in her room speaking in tongues, holding bottles filled with ash. She quit 2 days later. Haven't heard from her since. They tried to isolate Diddy, cut him off, but he still got one visitor, just one. He wasn't logged in the visitor log, no paper trail, but I was in the room when the man came through. Tall, pale, eyes too steady, said he was private security, contracted by the Bureau. Never named which one. He didn't carry a briefcase, just a flat metal case that never left his hand. Diddy met with him for 11 minutes. No audio was recorded, no visual either, the feed malfunctioned. Classic story. When the man left, Diddy didn't speak for 3 days. On his last night, I stayed a little longer after shift. Something in me didn't want to leave yet. I was gathering my things when I heard it. A voice, low and close, like someone speaking through the door, but not quite. I turned and Diddy was standing at the glass, face inches from it. His eyes were brighter than I'd ever seen them, pupils dilated, the whites almost gone. He didn't blink. "I don't want a trial," he said, barely more than a breath. They want silence. That was the last thing he said to me. I've seen a lot working in those walls. Violence, disease, despair, but nothing like him. He wasn't afraid, not at the end. He looked calm, like he'd already made peace with something bigger, something none of us could understand. I asked the man in the coat if anyone ever found the mark, if anyone retrieved the files buried in the floor. He didn't answer, just closed his notebook and stood. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said. "If anyone contacts you asking about inmate 50C, refer them to Central Authority." "And what if Central Authority disappears too?" I asked. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just reached for the door. Then you'll know it's already too late. Chapter 6, The Infected. I've worn many faces in that place. Sometimes I'm a chaplain, sometimes I'm a counselor, sometimes I'm just another warm body sitting quietly in the corner while someone cries into their hands and pretends it's not happening. Titles blur in institutions like MDC Brooklyn. We go where we're told, speak when permitted, and listen more than we act. But some things you don't unhear, and some people you don't forget. Inmate 50DC Diddy, they never called him by name in the paperwork, but everyone knew who he was. What they didn't know was what he was becoming. When he first arrived, he didn't ask for a Bible. That was my first clue something was off. Most inmates at least pretend to be religious after a while. Jail does that to men, makes them look for something beyond the walls, but not him. He never requested a cross, never asked for verses. What he did ask for was older, stranger. He asked for the Book of Enoch. He asked for the Nag Hammadi texts. He asked for Kabbalistic scrolls, ones I had to search for in old catalogs we hadn't used in decades. When I asked him why, he said nothing at first, just stared at the wall, fingers tracing invisible symbols across his knee like he was drawing in dust that wasn't there. Eventually, he told me the Bible was too young, that it was a post-collapsing document. I didn't know what he meant by that. I thought he was just spiraling like the others, finding meaning in gibberish. But then he started quoting things no inmate should know. Passages buried in apocryphal lore, obscure scripts that even I had to look up to understand. One day, he quoted something from a text I hadn't delivered yet. That was the first time I felt real fear in his presence. Diddy had always been difficult but composed, polite even, a detached kind of courtesy, like he knew how to manipulate tone and presence. But by the third week, he wasn't performing anymore. His eyes had changed. They didn't move like human eyes. They darted too fast, then froze too long, watching things that weren't there, listening to sounds no one else heard. And the whispers, everyone heard the whispers. We told ourselves it was the vents, or plumbing, or electrical feedback, but deep down, we knew better. There was something wrong in C block, something cold that settled in behind the eyes if you stayed too long. He requested a final confession. That was standard enough, but the timing wasn't. He hadn't spoken to me in 4 days, then suddenly called me by name during lunch rounds. Asked to meet in private. I filed the request the usual way, through upper management. Normally those get approved within hours. This one never came back. I followed up in person, and they told me, flat, emotionless, it had been denied. No reason given. When I asked why a man clearly deteriorating psychologically couldn't have a spiritual session, I was met with a shrug and an escort to the elevator. That was the moment I knew this had nothing to do with policy. Because you see, by then, it wasn't just Diddy. The inmate in cell 51 right next to him had begun showing symptoms, not mental ones, physical. I had checked in on him a week earlier during routine eval. Healthy guy, early 30s, fit, no documented conditions. Then one night, I got a report that he'd been found curled on the floor screaming about worms behind the wall. I visited his cell, but he wasn't responsive. His skin was flushed, feverish. Thin sores were forming on his arms, around his collarbone. His eyes wouldn't lock onto mine. He kept looking to the right, toward Diddy's cell. They moved him the next day. No med team, no wheelchair, just 2 guards in silent coordination. I watched from the hallway as they took him past me, his head lolled to one side. His mouth was open, and something dark had crusted around his teeth. He was muttering something, over and over. They sent him back, they sent him back, they sent him back. They sealed the cell after that. Yellow tape, thin plastic wrap over the door, like a crime scene, but no crime was logged. I asked if a quarantine had been initiated. The head of med shrugged, said it was maintenance. Maintenance, that's what they called it. No one else was allowed near that cell after that, not even the janitorial staff. They changed the entire unit's rotation schedule to keep everyone out for 2 full days. When it reopened, the paint was fresh, the floor gleamed, but the smell lingered, that faint metallic sting in the air, that dryness in the throat. You only noticed it if you were paying attention. I stopped attending Sunday rounds after that, volunteered for paperwork shifts instead. I didn't want to be near Diddy's cell, and yet, part of me still checked, glanced at the roster, monitored the temperature fluctuations logged by the internal sensors. There were spikes, strange ones, drops in temperature by 8 to 12 degrees in the middle of the night, short bursts of electrical interference. A nurse once reported the overhead light in Diddy's room flickering in a Morse code rhythm. I asked her what it spelled. She said she didn't know. She hadn't written it down. She'd been too scared to. And then one morning, Diddy was gone. No announcement, no transfer paperwork, just gone. I visited his old cell on my last day. I knew I was being reassigned. Higher-ups said it was routine and based on performance, but I knew better. Reassignment was code for you've seen too much. They said it was a promotion, but it felt like exile. I took one last walk through C block. No one else was around. Mid-morning, lights humming overhead. The hall smelled like bleach and air freshener, too clean to be real. I stood in front of Diddy's cell. The door was shut. The window had been frosted over, even though that wasn't standard for empty cells. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. Then I saw it. A streak in the paint, barely there, like someone had dragged a wet finger across the wall before it dried. I leaned closer. The angle caught the overhead light, and for just a moment the letters became clear. A message, faint, thin, written in something not ink. I am not the only one. I stepped back. Whatever happened to him, it wasn't just about him, and it wasn't finished. Chapter 7, The Tunnel Witness. People think janitors don't notice things. They think just because we push a mop and keep our heads down, we don't see the cracks. But in a place like MDC Brooklyn, the cracks are where all the truth leaks out. I've been working this place for going on 26 years. I've cleaned blood off walls, scraped messages from cell floors, picked up the pieces of smashed plastic food trays that looked like they were thrown by something stronger than a man. And through all of that, I've learned something. What they let the public see, what even most of the staff know, it's maybe 10% of what this building really holds. This place is old, older than it looks. They've redone the paint, reinforced the doors, upgraded the security systems, but the bones, the real bones, go way back, long before the current design. Underneath it all is a skeleton of older foundations, forgotten chambers, blocked off tunnels. Some of them used to be used for inmate transport back when this facility handled overflow from Rikers. Others date back even further, when this whole area was part of a military staging complex in the 50s. Most people don't know that. They don't know what's buried under their feet. But I do. There's one tunnel I always remembered, though no one talks about it anymore. It runs beneath Admin Wing B, just past the old laundry shaft. The hatch is sealed now, welded shut with 6-inch steel and painted over to match the walls. They say it was last used in the 1980s, says back when there was a security breach during a high-risk transfer. Rumors say it wasn't just inmates that were moved through that hatch. Some say federal scientists came through during a blackout in '89, escorted by soldiers with no insignia. Others say that's when the first signs started. Whispers, sudden outbursts, unexplained disappearances of maintenance staff. I stayed quiet back then, but I remembered. Then a few weeks ago I heard shouting echo up from the floor grates in cell block C. No one else was in the tunnels, no transport scheduled. The sub-levels were supposed to be sealed, and yet the sound traveled dull and distorted, like a man screaming into cloth, his voice bouncing off concrete. I filed a report, but it went nowhere. A guard told me it was probably echo from someone yelling upstairs, but I've been here too long to believe that. The night Diddy vanished, I was on second rotation, mopping the north corridor just past the infirmary. It was quiet, unnaturally so. Even the hum of the overhead lights felt thinner, like the electricity was being stretched too far. I'd just finished locking up the custodial closet when I saw it. The buzzer light next to the sub-level 3 panel blinking green. Now most people wouldn't think twice. Most don't even know what the green light means, but I do. It's not for fire drills or movement alerts. It's a legacy signal left over from the old system, when sub-levels still had active staff. Green means motion has been detected where there shouldn't be any. Normally that light stays dead. I've seen it flicker once in the past decade, and that turned out to be a rat nest chewing on old wires. This was different. This time, the panel buzzed with a low tone I hadn't heard in years. A tone that said someone, or something, was down there. There were no guards scheduled to monitor Sub 3 that night. I knew that for a fact, so I grabbed my pass card, the one they never disabled from back when I had floor access, and made my way to the east stairwell. The service elevator had long been decommissioned, but the stairs remained open for emergency use. The deeper I went, the colder the air got, not like it gets in winter. This was deeper, older, a kind of cold that makes your bones ache, like it's remembering something it shouldn't. The stairs creaked under my boots, dust rising with every step. By the time I reached the bottom, the only light came from a flickering overhead bulb, straining to stay alive. I pushed open the rusted gate and entered the corridor. The walls down there were covered in stains, streaks of moisture and mold tracing down like long fingers. Every sound echoed, and I mean every sound. My breathing, my footsteps, even the faint thump of my heartbeat in my ears. It all seemed louder than it should have been. I followed the corridor past 3 sealed doors until I reached the open one. Someone had been here. The lock had been disengaged, the metal latch dangling to one side. The door creaked inward when I nudged it. revealing a small room with low ceilings and a long-forgotten operating table in the center. It was the kind used decades ago, metal restraints on each corner, rusted bolts, drain holes in the floor. That's when I saw the gloves. A pair of disposable gloves, stained and twisted, lay beside the table. A snapped syringe, the plunger still halfway depressed, sat next to them. Nearby, wedged under the leg of the table, was a folded piece of paper. I hesitated before reaching for it. Something about the way it was placed felt deliberate, almost like it was waiting to be found. My hands trembled as I pulled it out and unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. "It opens every 7 years. I heard it last night." No name, no date, just those words in that sharp, jittery scrawl I'd seen scratched into the floor of cell 50 more than once before it got repainted. The air grew colder then, I swear it. I looked up, flashlight beam darting across the ceiling. That's when I noticed a crack running from one corner of the room, wide and jagged, as if something had pushed outward from beneath the concrete. Dust was falling from it in slow, steady flakes, the kind of dust that's been asleep for decades. I left, didn't run, didn't sprint, just walked as fast as my legs would carry me without making noise, back up the stairwell, back to the north corridor. I didn't stop until I reached the central custodial desk. My supervisor was there, sitting behind his usual stack of half-completed forms, sipping from that old metal thermos he never washed. I handed him the gloves, the syringe, the note. He didn't ask where I found them, didn't even blink. He just took the items, stood slowly, and opened the burn bin behind the desk, a steel container used for confidential waste. Without saying a word, he dropped everything in and pressed the ignition switch. Blue flame burst upward, swallowing everything. I stared at him. He finally looked up at me. "Burn everything you found," he said, "and don't go back down there again." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because I understood. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Chapter 8. The Other Cell. They don't give us names when they assign these files, just a case number and a classification level. Incident 744 was stamped with a red seal across the top of the packet, the kind that doesn't appear in public records systems. The directive was short: compile a full archival summary of all materials relating to inmate 50-C. Assemble it into an internal report. Do not make copies. Do not discuss with colleagues. Do not save any drafts on external devices. And above all else, do not contact the originating department. I've been an archivist for nearly 17 years. I've seen classified cases before: gangland assassinations, cartel extractions, failed black ops raids, but none of them had the silence that clung to this one. There was no primary report, no chain of custody, no official statement of death or transfer, just fragments. Handwritten logs, scrubbed security footage, private statements from people whose names had been erased or redacted so heavily they were functionally anonymous. At first glance, there was no story here at all, but the gaps themselves spoke volumes. I began by trying to establish the most basic of timelines: date of intake, date of last confirmed sighting, date of disappearance. Even those proved elusive. The inmate known to the system as 50-C was booked under a placeholder ID. The name Diddy appears nowhere in official systems, but coded references across security documents confirm the identity beyond doubt. And yet, his entire presence at MDC Brooklyn is held together by duct tape and unverified memo. No fingerprints logged, no mugshots stored. Only a few internal communications referencing asset containment and a placeholder profile with an enhanced observation flag. Worse than the gaps were the erasures. I reviewed 96 hours of security footage from Cell Block C. Most files opened normally until you reached the key timestamp, 3:12 to 3:16 a.m. on the night of disappearance. During that 4-minute window, cameras from 3 angles either looped, corrupted, or, more disturbingly, froze entirely. No glitch pattern, no electrical failure, just a moment of absolute stillness in a facility that was otherwise never quiet. Multiple logs report no movement, and yet conflicting temperature records from the same window report sharp thermal spikes, variations of up to 17 degrees across a 40-foot radius. That kind of fluctuation shouldn't be possible unless multiple heating systems failed simultaneously. But the HVAC reports are clean, untouched. I examined the door logs next. Every entry and exit to cell 50, where 50-minute C was housed, is time-stamped and controlled via biometric pad. There was no recorded door activity on the night in question, but just beneath that line item was something strange. An unexpected ping from cell 51. Cell 51, according to every official record, has been inactive since 1994. The notes on its condition suggest it was sealed after a structural collapse during renovations. Yet the biometric scanner outside cell 51 activated once that night, only once, 3:12 a.m. That was the moment I knew I wasn't archiving a disappearance. I was archiving something that wanted to be forgotten. I searched further, digging into medical records flagged for manual deletion pending. These were cached files, leftover fragments the system hadn't overridden. Most were garbled, but one was legible. A thermal scan taken during an unscheduled medical round by a night nurse on March 29th, 2 days before the event. The scan showed 2 heat signatures in the hallway between cells 50 and 51. One human, the other not. It was larger, not just in height, but in mass, a dense shape almost cylindrical at its core, radiating heat in irregular waves. No skeletal structure, no defined features, just a body-shaped void, humming with energy. The technician marked it as a sensor anomaly and moved on. I checked timestamps. That scan had been taken exactly 3 minutes after a reported whispering sound was logged by 3 inmates in the same block. Their statements never made it to incident reports, but I found them, handwritten and stuffed inside a folder marked miscellaneous, non-urgent. All 3 inmates described the same thing. A wet, muffled voice, not coming from a mouth, but from the walls. Still, the file I couldn't stop thinking about was the maintenance log. It listed all known cells and their functional statuses. Every single cell was accounted for, except one. A blank line, labeled Auxiliary Storage A, listed adjacent to cell 51. It had no access code, no door logs, no light schedule, yet it drew power from the main grid, just enough to run one fixture. What was in there? Who had access? I followed the power routing data. It traced back to a switch panel in sublevel 3. That same sublevel had been marked decommissioned in 2003. Yet, according to a current reading, the power flow through the lines feeding Auxiliary Storage A had increased the night of March 31, right as the camera feeds blinked out. I requested a visual inspection report. There wasn't one. Instead, I received a digital lockout message warning that the file had been moved to Tier 5 clearance storage, well above my level. A warning followed. Further access requests will be flagged and escalated. I stopped looking after that, but the questions never did. The report I'd compiled was rejected twice. Each time I tried to include the activation of Cell 51's scanner, the note was redacted before it reached submission. I wasn't the only one watching, that much was clear. Every night I closed my laptop. I did it with the feeling someone was behind me, reading over my shoulder, waiting to see how much I'd dare to include. Then one morning, a box arrived on my desk. No shipping label, no return address. Just brown paper wrapped tight, the tape sealed in a way that reminded me of a medical kit, precise and emotionless. Inside, a USB drive. On the casing, written in red ink, confessions. No other contents. I plugged it into an isolated system, one we use for reviewing legacy formats. The only file was an audio recording. 15 minutes, static-drenched, but one voice was unmistakable. Diddy. His voice was calm but strained, like someone speaking after a long illness. He recited no names, no events, just fragments. They reached out from beneath, he said. The floor remembers their weight. Later. They do not ask, they do not speak, they remember, and remembering is enough. Near the end, he paused for a long time, then he whispered one final sentence. I was not taken, I was collected. I sat there in silence for a long time, not moving. That word, collected. It didn't feel like kidnapping, it felt like inventory, like he was a resource being retrieved, like someone or something had been waiting to reclaim what was already theirs. The final page of the Incident 744 file is blank. It's supposed to include a resolution statement, a final determination. I didn't write one. Because there is none. He's not missing. He was collected.